Hi everybody, welcome back to English 90. This is for our class for Wednesday, the 13th of October, where I wanted to continue on with the textbook. Last class we didn't have a chance to talk about subjects and verbs, so I wanted to address that today, as well as talk about 4 bases for evaluating writing, that's chapter 6, sentence fragments, and also talk a little bit about your first formal writing assignment, what I'm calling paper number 1. So, in terms of thinking about our transitioning into grammar, I wanted to talk about the parts of speech, specifically those parts of speech that are relevant for trying to avoid some of the most common writing errors that occur. So, some general parts of speech, as you can see in the notes below. First, a verb, and that's an action word. And more often than not, it's easiest to begin by trying to identify the verb or verbs within a sentence. It could be an observable action like walking or talking, but it can also be an action that can't be observed, such as dreaming or believing. And that very challenging verb to be, the state of existence, is also a verb. In last class, we talked a little bit about how verbs oftentimes indicate things like the time in which an action is occurring, and that we change the verb to indicate past tense or present tense or future tense. And then there's some verbs that don't necessarily follow the rules, and to be is one of them. So you just can't add an ed and said I bead, you bead, or something like that. It's I am, you are, he, she is. It's known as irregular, and basically what we have to do is just memorize each of the forms, which you've probably already done if you've got English as your first language, or you've spent a good amount of time learning English as a second or a third or a fourth language. Then we have a noun. And nouns are basically people, places, things, or they can also be ideas. They don't necessarily have to be something that is visual. So again, it could be something like a thought. And in terms of thinking a little bit about nouns, what you want to do is probably think about, more importantly, the subject. Now, I wish they had used a different term for this, because subject usually means topic. But when we're talking about grammar, the subject basically means something like who or what is performing the action. So if it's a who or what, it's going to be a noun, because a noun is a person, place, belief, or idea. But you need to have a specific noun that is performing the action in order to basically be able to have a complete sentence. And if you don't have a complete sentence, you have something called a sentence fragment. That means it is an incomplete sentence. This is addressed on page 481 or 491. And it's missing something. It could be missing a verb. For instance, David home. There is no verb there. What did David do in terms of home? Did David go home? Did David buy a home? So in this instance, it's missing a verb. Or it could have a verb, but it doesn't have a subject. So it could be buy a home. But who bought the home? And of course, we need the subject being David, which is who or what did the buying. So David is a noun. But home is also a noun. It's a person, place, thing, or idea. So this is where things can get a little bit tricky in terms of identifying the subject. That the subject is more than just a verb, which is a person, place, thing, or idea. It's the verb that's engaging in an action. So in terms of thinking about what makes a sentence fragment an incomplete sentence, it's missing a verb or verbs. It's missing a subject or subjects. Or it also doesn't express a complete thought. A sentence should be able to stand on its own as an independent unit and be able to make sense. And you shouldn't have to rely on the sentences ahead of it or the sentences afterwards for it to make sense. So let me take that sentence again of David went home, a complete sentence. Now I can change this and turn it into a fragment by actually adding words, not subtracting words. I can add the word because. Because David went home. Now, I've just constructed a sentence fragment. I do have a verb, went. I do have a subject, David. But by adding the verb because, that is known as a dependent word. It depends on additional information. So I've just taken a complete sentence, David went home, And I turned it into a sentence fragment by writing because David went home. Because in order for the sentence to make sense, I need to know what exactly happened because he went home. Because David went home, he missed the meeting, let's say. So in other words, additional information is necessary. This is a very common sentence fragment because usually that additional information is given in the sentence ahead of it or the sentence following it about him going to the meeting. So it makes sense when you are reading, but remember, if you are looking at the grammar of a sentence, you cannot rely on the information in the sentences beforehand or the sentences afterwards. You need to rely on that one sentence as a unit, because David went home. And imagine going up to someone, let's say in a hallway, and saying to them, because David went home. Of course they're going to have questions. Because he went home, what happened? So this is what a sentence fragment is. It does not express a complete idea. So we'll revisit the idea of sentence fragments as the semester progresses, but I wanted to talk about the chapter that I had assigned for today, which is about 4 bases for evaluating writing. And this is basically something for you to keep in mind when you are constructing your writing. And this is something that a reader, much like a teacher, is evaluating when they are looking at someone's writing. So these are the elements. And this begins on page 148 of the textbook. And the first is unity. In other words, that you want to stick to one topic and stay with that topic. If you continue to change from one topic to another, then your subject is not unified. Now, they're giving you examples of essays here, and we are instead going to be focusing on the paragraph and then not thinking about the essay until later on. But I still wanted to read you some of the examples that they give you to illustrate when something isn't unified. And there are 2 essays that they give us. The first is about teenage pranks. That looking back at some of the things I did as a teenager makes me break out in a sweat. The purpose of each adventure was fun, but occasionally things got out of hand. In my search for good times, I was involved in 3 notable pranks, ranging from fairly harmless to fairly serious. The first prank proved that good, clean fun does not have to be dull. As a high school student, I was credited with making the world's largest dessert. With several friends, I spent an entire year collecting boxes of Jell-O. Entering our school indoor pool one night, we turned the water temperature up high as it would go, and poured in box after box of the strawberry powder. The next morning, school officials arrived to find the pool filled with 13,000 gallons of the quivering, rubbery stuff. No one was hurt by the prank, but we did manage to suffer through 3 days of a massive cleanup. Not all my pranks were harmless, and one involved risking my life. As soon as I got my driver's license, I wanted to join the Flyers Club. Membership in this club was limited to those who could make their cars fly at a distance of at least 10 feet. The qualifying site was at an old quarry field where friends and I built a ramp made of dirt. I drove my battered Mercury Cougar up the ramp as fast as it would go. The Cougar flew 10 feet, but one of the tires exploded when I landed. The car rolled on its side. Luckily, I escaped with only a bruised arm. Risking my own life was bad enough, but there was another prank in which other people could have been hurt too. On this occasion, I accidentally set a valley on fire. 2 of my friends and I were sitting on a hill sharing a few beers. It was a warm summer night. There was absolutely nothing to do. The idea came like a thunderstorm. We collected a supply of large plastic trash bags, emergency highway flares, half a tank of helium left over from the science fair experiment, and then we began to construct a fleet of UFOs. Filling the bags with helium, we tied them closed with wire and suspended several burning flares below each flag. Our UFOs leaped into the air like an army of invading Martians. Rising and darting in the blackness, they convinced even us. Our fun turned into horror, though, as we watched the balloons begin to drop into the wooded valley of expensive homes below. Soon a brush fire started, and quickly sobered, we hurried off to call the fire department anonymously. Every so often I think back on the things that I did as a teenager, and I chuckle at the innocent pranks. Feel lucky that I didn't harm myself or others with the not-so-innocent ones. Those years were filled with wild times. Today I'm older and wiser, and maybe just a little bit more boring. Now notice all of the things that are going on with this particular essay, and that basically we've got 3 pieces of evidence, which even when you're writing a paragraph, you want to try to aim for 3 things, even though this was an essay. Notice how detailed it is. So we talked about using senses and giving as much detail and explanation as possible to convince the reader. And notice also how it is unified. That basically this particular essay focuses on one idea. And basically the other example they give you in essay 2 doesn't necessarily focus on one idea as well. In the unreal world of television situation comedies, teenagers are carefree, smart, funny, wisecracking, secure kids. Most of them are more together than the adults on the shows. This, however, isn't how I recall my teenage years. As a teen, I suffered. Every day I battled the terrible physical, family, and social troubles of adolescence. And for one thing, I had to deal with the demoralizing physical problem, acne. And then the person goes on and they talk about acne. And then the second one talks about, in addition to fighting acne, I felt compelled to fight my family. And then this person goes about and talks about family. And worst of all, I had to face the social traumas of being a teenager. And this person talks about all of the social issues about being a teenager. And then finally it says that I'm glad not to be a teenager anymore and the reasons why. The problem is that this essay has some details that are irrelevant to its topic. For instance, it says something within the last few years, treatments for acne have improved. That has nothing to do with the point of this particular essay, the terrible physical, family, and social troubles of adolescence. And so when this person goes on that doctors prescribe special drugs that clear up pimples almost immediately, that doesn't support the topic statement about the physical problems of acne. So the idea is to try to be as unified as possible. Now, the second piece is to make sure that you have support, basically evidence. And I believe I had talked about the idea that you want to have as much evidence as possible because basically what you're trying to do is to offer as many details as possible to convince the reader of what your position happens to be. So in this particular instance, on page 153, we have, again, an essay, but this could be a paragraph as well, about reactions to disappointment, where we get a lot of detail. Ben Franklin said that the only sure thing in life are death and taxes. He left something out, though, disappointment. No one gets through life without experiencing many disappointments. Strangely, though, most people seem unprepared for the disappointment and react to it negatively. They feel depressed or try to escape their troubles, instead of using disappointment as an opportunity for growth. One negative reaction to disappointment is depression. For example, Helen, a woman trying to win a promotion, works hard for over a year in her department. She's so sure she'll get the promotion, in fact, that she's already picking out the car she'll buy when her salary increase comes through. However, the boss names one of Helen's co-workers to the spot. The fact that all the other department employees tell Helen that she was the one who truly deserved the promotion doesn't help her deal with the crushing disappointment. Deeply depressed, Helen decides that all her goals are doomed to defeat. She loses her enthusiasm for her job and can barely force herself to show up every day. Helen tells herself she's a failure, that doing a good job isn't worth the work. Another negative reaction to disappointment, and one that often follows depression, is the desire to escape. Jamal fails to get into the college his brother is attending, the college that was the focus of all of his dreams, and decides to escape his disappointment. Why worry about college at all? Instead, he covers up his real feelings by giving up on his schoolwork and getting completely involved with his friends, parties, and good times. Or Carla doesn't make the varsity basketball team, something she wanted very badly, and so she refuses to play sports every day. Then she won't have to confront her disappointment and learn to live with it. The positive way to react to disappointment is to use it as a chance for growth. This isn't easy, but it's the only way to deal with the inevitable part of life. Helen, the woman who wasn't promoted, could have handled her disappointment by looking at other options. If her boss doesn't recognize her talent and hard work, perhaps she should transfer to another department. Or she could ask the boss how to improve her performance so that she'd be a shoo-in for the next promotion. Jamal, the boy who didn't get into the college of his choice, should look into other schools. Going to another college may encourage him to be his own person, step out of his brother's shadow, realize that being turned down by one college isn't a final judgment on his abilities or his potential. Rather than escape into drugs, Carla could improve her basketball skills for a year, or pick up another sport like swimming or tennis that would probably turn out to be more useful to her as an adult. Disappointments are unwelcome but regular visitors to everyone's life. We can feel depressed about them or we can try to escape from them. The best thing, though, is to accept the disappointment and then try to use it somehow. Step over the unwelcome visitor on the doorstep and get on with life. So this essay obviously offers very specific details. We've got names, we've got specific situations. So this essay on page 153 is contrasted with the essay on page 152 that talks about disappointment and all of the disappointments we have. And it talks about how some people sulk and some people blame, and there are positive ways to deal with disappointment. But we don't get specific details and examples of how people experience disappointment and deal with it. So the second piece, again, is coherence, making sure you've got detailed pieces of evidence, or support, I should say, making sure that you've got detailed pieces of evidence. The third piece is coherence, making sure that you have organization. We had talked about that there's lots of different ways to organize an essay. It just has to make sense to the average person. And once again, on page 155 to 157, we're given two essays about coherence. And the essay that is most coherent is about the benefits of television on page 156. We hear a lot about the negative effects of TV on the viewer. Obviously, television can be harmful if we watch constantly to the exclusion of other activities. It would just be as harmful to surf the internet all the time or to eat constantly. However, when television is watched in moderation, it is extremely valuable as it provides relaxation, entertainment, and education. First of all, watching TV has the value of sheer relaxation. Watching television can be soothing and restful after an 8-hour day of pressure, challenges, or concentration. After working hard all day, people look forward to a new episode of a favorite show or yet another showing of The Hangover or Mean Girls. The period of relaxation leaves viewers refreshed and ready to take on the world again. Watching TV also seems to reduce stress in some people. The benefits of television is just beginning to be recognized. One doctor, for example, advises his patients with high blood pressure to relax in the evening with a few hours of television. In addition to being relaxing, television is also entertaining. Along with standard comedies and dramas and game shows that provide enjoyment to viewers, television offers a variety of movies and sporting events. Moreover, viewers can pay a monthly fee and receive special cable programming or direct TV. Viewers can watch first-run movies, rock and classical music concerts, and specialized sporting events like international soccer and pay-per-view boxing matches. Viewers can also buy or rent movies and TV shows through streaming services. Still another popular area of TV entertainment is video games. PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo consoles allow the owner to have a video game arcade in the living room. Most important, television is educational. Preschoolers learn colors, numbers, and letters from public TV programs like Sesame Street that use animation and puppets to make learning fun. Science shows for older children go on location to analyze everything from volcanoes to rocket launches. Adults, too, can learn from shows like Nova, do-it-yourself home improvement programs, and cooking shows. Also, television widens our knowledge by covering important events and current news. Viewers can see and hear presidential speeches, state funerals, natural disasters, and election results as they are happening. Perhaps because television is such a powerful force, we like to criticize it and search for its flaws. However, the benefits of television should not be ignored. We can use television to relax, to have fun, and to make ourselves smarter. This electronic world, then, is a servant, not a master. So basically, what we've got in this particular essay is that the material is clearly organized. It's logical. They're using emphatic order where they are talking about the 3 positives of TV, ending with the most important use. TV as an educational tool. There are transitional words to connect from one idea to the next, like first of all, or in addition, or most importantly. You can see that also that in the beginning, it's listed in the order in which it is going to be discussed. That we're told that TV provides relaxation, entertainment, and education. And that is indeed the order in which it is discussed in the essay, which you could also do in a paragraph. First relaxation, then entertainment, and then finally education. And the first essay that we're given to show contrast on page 155, the harmful effects of a television. The writer doesn't necessarily have a clear and consistent way of organizing things. For instance, saying worst of all in the second paragraph and then continuing on with other things. Worst of all should come at the ending. None of the supporting paragraphs seem to organize things in a logical way. For instance, the first paragraph talks about older viewers, then it moves to younger viewers, then it jumps back to older people again, so it's moving back and forth. The third paragraph talks about an opening idea that families talking only during commercials, to several intervening ideas, and then back to the idea of the family talking to commercials. And there are very few transitional, if no transitional words to guide the reader. So basically, again, you want to think about coherence. How well is it organized? Support. Are you giving minimum 3 pieces of evidence with details for those evidence? And unity. Are you sticking to one topic? The last thing that a reader is looking for and that you need to be concerned about is grammar, what we call sentence skills. This is correct grammar and mechanics. And the reason why is because each time there is an error that a reader can identify, it basically forces the reader to lose their focus, and they're concentrating on the error rather than on the content of what it is that you're saying. Now, there is no such thing as a perfect piece of writing. There will probably be errors in it. But you don't want to have so many errors that the reader becomes frustrated in trying to understand what you're saying, or the reader becomes distracted by the errors and is no longer paying attention to what you're saying. Which gets us back basically to grammar and mechanics. When I was talking about one of the first major errors in terms of sentences is something called a sentence fragment, an incomplete sentence. There are other errors that I will also talk about in further classes, errors like run-ons and comma splices. And some of this language might be language that I might be using in response to your journals. If you'll remember, I'm asking you to do some readings outside of class and to summarize the main points of those readings and to give your feedback. And I'm reviewing what you've written, and I'm also correcting any grammatical errors or places where you can improve your style of writing. And some of these things we've already talked about, for instance, being concise, to try to use fewer words to express an idea than more words to express an idea. Other things we're just in the midst of. For instance, we are in the midst of a sentence fragment, an incomplete sentence that we will continue to discuss. Other things like comma splice, we will talk about in the future. So as you are reading the feedback from your journals, just sort of think about the comments that I'm making. Certainly, if you need further direction with a comment, you could look up the information in your textbook or just simply ask me or wait. Because ultimately, we will get to the point in the semester where we are working with that error. You do want to keep hold of all of your journals because ultimately what you want to do at the ending of the semester is give some sort of presentation about all of your journals that we'll talk about later. So as you hold on to your journals, you also want to begin to look and see if there are patterns of mistakes. Because once you start getting to about the third journal or so, you will probably begin to see patterns. In other words, very similar kinds of comments that I'm making on your assignment. So for one of you, I might be writing spelling over and over again, which means that you are misspelling words, which means you want to pay careful attention to the spell check. Or for somebody else, I might be writing fragments. And what that means is that you are writing incomplete sentences. So you want to pay careful attention when you are writing your sentences. Read each sentence out loud and ask yourself, does this sentence express a complete idea? And it could be that it does not express a complete idea because it's missing a verb, an action word. It could be it's missing a complete idea or because it doesn't have a subject, who or what is performing that action. Or it could be that it has both a subject and a verb, but it still doesn't express a complete idea because it has what we call a dependent word. Words like because or after or although that basically require the sentence to have additional information that we're going to be talking about. So all of this gets to our first writing assignment, paper number 1, the paragraph. I had indicated that I wanted us to talk about paper number 1 on the 18th, which is Wednesday. Or I wanted us to submit paper number 1 on Wednesday, the 18th, 11:59 p.m. via PDF to my email, ruiz@gcc.mass.edu, because what I wanted you to be able to do was basically to submit that in so that I could use my grading program, which works best on email, and I could evaluate for grammar and mechanics as well as content and put a letter grade on that. That's different from the journals where I'm putting just basically a check mark grade. And I'm working on your second journal now to return that to you. Some of you might have already received your second journal, and some of you might still be waiting for it. Your next journal isn't going to be due for a while. It's not going to be due until October 27th. So that'll give me enough time to be able to give you your second journal. This was a short week because we had the Indigenous Peoples Day day off. So you don't have any writing assignment due this particular week, though of course you do have your attendance question in the way that you normally would at the ending of each class. And as I indicated, the first writing assignment, which is going to be due on the 18th, so we've got approximately or actually we've got just about another class or so before you hand it in, because that'll be due at 11:59 p.m. Basically, what I'm asking you to do is to write about an activity that gives you a feeling of accomplishment, as I had indicated in last class. And you'll remember that I'm asking you to write a paragraph. Certainly, you can write more than a paragraph, and the textbook is giving you lots of examples of that. But at this particular point, I wanted to focus on the idea of what is a well-written paragraph. And remember that a paragraph deals with one topic. A paragraph has a topic sentence that summarizes the paragraph, and usually it's the first sentence. And then it has supporting sentences, and this is where we get our evidence and our details, hopefully 3 pieces of evidence with details. And then there's a concluding sentence that gives a sense of closure. And eventually our writing assignments will move beyond the paragraph so that we are writing what we call a college essay. In other words, you have an introductory paragraph, a body paragraph, and a concluding paragraph. And then we expand that so that we start getting something that is looking more like a 2-page paper when you're writing well-developed paragraphs. And at the very beginning of the semester, we were given an example of a well-written paragraph. This is on page 4, and it was about the hazards of movie-going. And this is basically an example of what I'm assuming that you will be submitting in for your first writing assignment for the paragraph. And I'll reread this paragraph to you because I believe I might have read it to you earlier on in the semester. The hazards of movie-going. Although I love movies, I've found that there are drawbacks to movie-going. One problem is just the inconvenience of it all. To get to the theater, I have to drive for at least 15 minutes or more if traffic is bad. It can take forever to find a parking spot, and then I have to walk across a huge parking lot to the theaters. There I encounter long lines, sold-out shows, ever-increasing prices. And I hate sitting with my feet sticking to the floor because of other people's spilled snacks. Another problem is my lack of self-control at the theater. I often stuff myself with unhealthy, calorie-laden snacks. My choices might include a bucket of popcorn, a box of Milk Duds, a giant soda, or all 3. The worst problem is some of the other moviegoers. Kids run up and down the aisle. Teenagers laugh and shout at the screen. People of all ages drop soda cups and popcorn tubs, cough and burp and talk to one another. All in all, I'd rather stay home and watch a DVD in the comfort of my own living room. First of all, on page 4 with this paragraph, notice that it's given a title because it was submitted in as an assignment. The hazards of movie-going. Much like you should have a title for the paragraph that you submit in. And note that the title does not need to be a complete sentence, but the title should give you a sense of what it is you're writing about. Notice that this paragraph has a first sentence, a topic sentence that basically summarizes what the paragraph is about. And that sentence is, although I love movies, I found there are drawbacks to movie-going. Note that this paragraph gives us 3 drawbacks, 3 reasons with details for each. The first is the inconvenience, and then we get all of the details of how it's inconvenient to see a movie. Things like parking and long lines and expensive tickets. And then we're told that the second drawback of going to the movies is a lack of self-control. And again, we're given details about how this person eats a lot of junk food and the specifics of the junk food. Popcorn, Milk Duds, giant sodas. And then we're given the third reason why it's difficulty going to the movies, and that's because of other moviegoers. And again, we're given the details about people talking or looking on their cell phones and so forth and so on. And then we are given a very last sentence that serves as a concluding sentence to tie things up and give a sense of closure or ending. All in all, I'd rather stay at home and watch a DVD in the comfort of my own living room. So that's basically what I'm thinking about, that you would be writing for an activity that gives you a feeling of accomplishment. And note that in this particular paragraph, which is multiple sentences long, the hazards of movie going, if this were to be typed with 1-inch borders and double spaced, which is something that you can set on your computer program. And you'll remember at the beginning of the semester, I had added some videos about how to do that, if you're not quite sure. This would probably be about a page or so of writing as it stands, with it being double spaced with 1-inch borders. So that's basically what I'm considering for your submission for paper number 1, the paragraph. An activity that gives you a feeling of accomplishment. Though again, certainly you can write more, but if you are writing more, you want to make sure that you're keeping to the criteria on the definition of a paragraph. That it is, each paragraph you write has one topic, has a topic sentence, has hopefully 3 supporting sentences, and with a concluding sentence. If you're not quite ready to do that yet, we are going to be doing that together with paper number 2. But as you know, with the attendance questions that I've been asking you, the last attendance question I asked you was to try to get you to think about an answer that you could give for paper number 1. Because for the last attendance question, I asked you to identify an activity that gives you a feeling of accomplishment. Not that you have to write your paper about that. But I thought that for today's attendance question, we could take that a step further. That whatever activity it was that you identified that gave you a feeling of accomplishment, for today's attendance question, that would be due on Thursday, the 14th at 10 a.m. And again, if you need additional time, let me know. You would list that activity that you had identified last class in the attendance question, and you would give 3 separate reasons, 3 different reasons why that activity gives you a feeling of accomplishment. And that will be today's attendance question. And again, you can see that what I'm trying to do is to give you practice in relation to writing, to come up with a topic or an idea, and then to come up with 3 reasons to support that topic or that idea. And of course, the more detail you give for each of those reasons, the better off you're writing. But at this point, I just want the reasons, though certainly you can give some details if you'd like as well. So that pretty much does it for our class for today. I hope you're all doing well. I am doing well. And we will continue on next class. Talk a little bit more about that first writing assignment that will be due on the Monday class, paper number 1 at 11:59 actually p.m. So it'll be after our Monday class. And also I will spend a little bit of time talking about developing an essay. In other words, transitioning from writing a paragraph to actually writing an essay. So again, I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well, and we will continue on next class. Take care. Bye-bye.